Hello, and thank you for joining us for the NACE Helios Contractor Safety Orientation. Today, we're going to discuss general health and safety topics, emergency procedures and evacuation meeting sites, hazards of the Helios sites, safe work practices, and NACE procedures. Remember, working safely will always be part of your job on the Helios sites. If something happens, report it immediately. If you need something, please ask. If you don't know something or something just doesn't look right, ask. You do not operate valves or equipment without prior authorization and not without the proper permit in place. A NACE employee will be assigned as the primary contact for all visitors and contractors. All visitors must sign in and out of the visitor's log for accountability in case of an emergency at the office. And when going directly to a farm site, contact your NACE contact to sign you in and out. Know where emergency equipment is located so you know where it is before you need it. This would be things like your eye washes, fire extinguishers, safety showers, and emergency phones. Your NACE contact will discuss emergency procedures with you on your arrival to the site, including what to do and where to go for various types of emergencies. NACE reserves the right to conduct searches and inspections of plant property or any part of an individual's property that is brought on to the plant site. All activities are monitored and recorded by video camera. Parking is provided for all contractors. NACE does not assume any responsibility in connection with the use of the parking areas, nor any risk for loss or damages as a result of using this facility. Vehicles allowed access into the plant shall not block emergency escape routes. These will be your emergency contacts while you're on the site. Please make a note of the contact and the phone number as listed here. And any injury, illness, fire, vehicle accident, property damage, or other significant incident must be reported immediately to your site contact. An initial written report will be required by the end of the shift. An accident investigation complete report will be required within 2 weeks of the occurrence. Please immediately notify your NACE contact of any OSHA visit or OSHA complaint. Fire extinguishers. These are located in various areas throughout the NACE-controlled area of the site. In case of a small fire, all employees or visitors who are trained in fire extinguisher use are authorized to use these extinguishers outside of the Class 1 areas. Immediately notify your host that you have used an extinguisher to put out a fire. You are not authorized to put out a fire in a Class 1 area. You are to evacuate and seek assistance. If there is a small fire that it's safe to put out, if one extinguisher does not put out the fire, or if it's unsafe to put out the fire, safely evacuate the area to the site evacuation point. Proceed to the actual site entrance at the main road and notify your host to call the local fire department. There is no smoking at any Helios NACE site because these are primarily Class 1 areas where flammable gas will be present. Please never exceed a speed of 10 miles per hour when driving on any Helios site. Reporting to work under the influence of drugs or alcohol is cause for denial of access to the site. Use of alcohol or drugs on Helios property will be cause for immediate removal of the individual and/or the contractor from the property. Results of drug and alcohol screening analysis may be required prior to performing any work at the facility. No firearms, concealed or otherwise, are allowed on site. Fighting or other aggressive or disruptive behaviors also are not allowed on the site. Follow the guidelines provided by your plant contact. NACE will not tolerate violations of basic safety requirements. Hard hats are required at all times except in office areas. Proper safety equipment must be worn at all times in accordance with the Helios safety manual. And Helios requires safety-toed boots, safety glasses with side shields, hard hats, where needed hearing protection, and at all times a high visibility safety vest as a minimum standard. Additional PPE may be required in accordance with the work assignment. Shaded safety glasses are not permitted inside buildings. Hearing protection is required in posted high noise areas. High voltage electrical equipment must be de-energized, isolated and grounded, and properly tagged with locks installed in accordance with the safety manual procedure, SMP9, electrical safety. The wearing of a high visibility vest is required at all times. While walking the site, remain alert to the ever-present hazard of truck and vehicular traffic on the site. Be particularly careful walking on or across drives or near blind corners or during periods of darkness. All electrical equipment must be properly insulated and or grounded to ensure safe operation. Use of properly rated explosion-proof or non-spark producing tools and equipment in flammable handling areas is subject to the provisions of the hot work permit. Report all accidents, unsafe conditions, or emergencies to any Helios employee by word of mouth or two-way radio or phone as soon as possible. If there is doubt as to what constitutes an emergency, err to the side of conservative and report your observations. There are many potential hazards that may be present at the Helios sites. These include, but are not limited to, the following: high pressure natural gas and propane, biogas, which has explosivity and fire hazards and contains no odorant. In other words, it will give no olfactory warning of its presence. High voltage electricity, high pressure and temperature steam and water, hot surfaces, fuel oil, waste oil, and chemicals, many of these corrosive. Remotely starting, rotating equipment, mechanical hazards, biological hazards, which would be feedstock or manure that contains a variety of bacteria, parasites, viruses, and fungi. You could be exposed through contact or through inhalation of dried aerosols. Confined space hazards, atmospheric hazards, including but not limited to carbon monoxide, methane, hydrogen sulfide, low or high oxygen levels, and explosivity hazards, and also ammonia. Lockout tagout hazards, fall from height hazards, traffic hazards, noise hazards, and of course, Class 1 electrically classified areas where the hazard would be the presence of flammable gas. Obey all signage and instructions provided in these areas. Obey all site safety signage posted throughout these sites. You will find various chemicals located throughout the site, including, as we mentioned, oil and waste oil, biogas, corrosive boiler chemicals, iron sponge, biogas, high pressure non-odorized biogas, compressed gases of various types, propane, and again, you'll see the biogas. Contractors must designate one employee per shift that will be responsible for forklift duties. Only that individual will operate the forklift. NACE equipment must not be used without authorization by your NACE contact and without the demonstration of competence on that piece of equipment and or signing a form that accepts responsibility for the equipment if the site allows. NACE requires the use of fall protection when working at heights. Fall protection is required when there is a potential fall from a height of 4 foot or greater above another surface. Do not mix rigging equipment with fall protection personal protective equipment. Make sure your anchor point can hold 5,000 pounds per person. If you have questions about tie-off points, ask your host. Inspect equipment every time you use it. Contractors are expected to provide their own personal protective equipment. Taking chances and climbing or working without proper fall protection equipment will not be tolerated at the NACE Helios site. Work permits are required whenever a hazard is present, such as lockout, tagout, confined space entry, hot work, excavations, other. Job hazard analyses need to be completed for all permits. Understand the hazards and risks associated with your work and remove them before an incident can happen. Anytime you need to delineate an area, you can use yellow caution or red danger tape. Remember, if you are in an area where yellow caution tape is being used, look around and see what the hazards are before going through that area and use extreme caution. Conversely, if you need to pass through an area with red danger tape, go around. If you do proceed and go through these areas, you will be subject to removal from the job site. These are very dangerous areas. Work permits are required for all contractor jobs. See your NACE host. Contractors will provide and keep in good repair fences, temporary sidewalks, guardrails, barricades, warning lights, signs, and other safeguards necessary to protect all personnel from injury. Yellow caution tape is not appropriate for serious hazards. Lockout tagout permits are issued through your NACE contact. All contractors will have a NACE contact person for their job, and that person must be signed on to the job as long as the contractor is signed on. All isolation points at NACE are locked. All isolation locks are red in color and are accompanied by a danger tag. Keys for the isolation locks are returned to the control room or your NACE contact and placed in the lockbox specified for that lotto. Everyone who signs on to that lotto will be issued a lock that they must place on the lockbox. Contractors should use their own locks. NACE will only issue locks if necessary, but does not do this as a general rule. The key for your lock is to be kept with you until you sign off the lotto. Please stand by. Never operate or defeat a danger tagged or locked component. Do not work or operate any equipment without proper lotto. Lottoed equipment will be obtained in accordance with the Helios Plant Safety Manual SMP3. Lockout, tagout. Only those contractors who have been trained on the Helios plant lotto may be involved in establishing a lotto. All personal locks must be removed at the end of your shift. A contractor foreman may sign on and place a lock onto the lotto lockbox representing his crew, but then his key must be placed into a separate contractor lockbox onto which each crew member places their own lock. The contractor foreman is then in control of that separate contractor lockbox. Remember to sign off the lotto when you are done with the job. Unauthorized removal of a tag or a lock is grounds for immediate removal from the site. You will need to secure a hot work permit to perform any hot work outside of areas that are designated for this type of work. Adequate ventilation shall be provided whenever welding or cutting in confined spaces takes place. Anyone entering a confined space must follow the requirements of SMP7 confined space entry. Prior to cutting or burning in elevated areas, any equipment below shall be protected from sparks and slag. The area around the hot work shall be inspected for combustible materials and removed or protected prior to any hot work. Wear appropriate PPE and make sure your job doesn't impact someone else. Use protective barriers if necessary. A hot work permit is required for all work except for areas designated for that use. Areas so designated still must be inspected prior to use. A hot work permit must be posted in the area where the hot work is being performed. If you are welding, do not leave electrodes in holders when the weld is finished, as this constitutes a fire hazard, or as they say, leave no stick in the stinger. Class 1 electrically classified areas are clearly marked to warn of explosion hazards. In these areas, no cell phones will be present and no smoking, spark producing, or flame producing activities may take place. All personnel in Class 1 areas must wear a Class 1 rated, bump tested, calibrated personal gas monitor due to the ever-present potential for gas leaks. All confined spaces are identified with signage. Do not enter a space until the space has been authorized for entry and a permit issued. Permits are issued through your NACE point of contact. If all hazards can be removed, the space may be reclassified to non-permit required confined space. Continuous monitoring with a calibrated air gas monitor is required for all occupied spaces. At any time and in any space, if anything smells, feels, or just seems wrong in the space, or if your gas monitor alarms, you are required to leave the space immediately and notify your NACE point of contact. Do not return until you've spoken to your contact. Contractor personnel shall not enter any space barricaded or marked with signs reading "Danger, Confined Space, Entry by Permit Only," or similar warning, as per the NACE Confined Space Entry Safety Manual, SMP 7. Contractor personnel will comply with all provisions of the established confined space entry procedure and receive permission from plant authorities before entering tanks, pits, vaults, iron sponge vessels, and other confined spaces on the site. Only those contractors who have been trained in confined space entry may enter a confined space with a permit. Chemicals and hazard communication. You have a right to know the hazards of the chemicals that you are working with. Safety data sheets are required for all hazardous chemicals. Helios NACE can provide safety data sheets for our chemicals, and if you need a copy, ask your NACE contact for one. Likewise, contractors will need to have safety data sheets available to NACE for all chemicals that they use on the site as well that are hazardous in nature. All containers need to be labeled with the contents and the hazards, as well as the PPE requirements for that chemical under the new OSHA globally harmonized system. If you bring chemicals on site and do not use them up, remove them for proper disposal. Do not leave them behind. Be sure to conduct daily crew meetings with your site contact. Allow everybody on the work team to provide their input. Make sure everyone knows clearly what is happening for the day. Understand the hazards presented and coordinate with operations. Get your permits for the day and have them available at the job site. Post your permits at the job site. When conditions change, stop work and contact your NACE contact to identify whether updates to your permits are required. Wrapping things up, working safely is not an option. It is a component and expected requirement of the job. Concerning near misses, if something does happen, please take the time to report it and get it corrected so that someone doesn't get hurt the next time. Use your stop work authority as needed. This is highly encouraged. Work safely and come back to see us again another time. If you have any questions or comments, please contact your NACE Helios contact for further discussion. We want to thank you for working to help keep Helios a NACE safe workplace. You will now be directed to complete a short quiz.